Listen. Okay, let's pray. Adakah penghalau kesukaran selain Tuhan? Katakanlah terpujilah Tuhan. Ya Tuhan, semua hambanya dan semua tunduk pada perintahnya. Adakah penghalau kesukaran selain Tuhan? Katakanlah terpujilah Tuhan. Ya Tuhan, semua mania dan semua tunduk pada perintahnya.
Alabado seas, oh Señor mi Dios. Cada vez que intento hacer mención de ti, me lo impide la sublimidad de tu posición y la irresistible grandeza de tu poder. Pues si te alabara a lo largo de la extensión de tu dominio y la duración de tu soberanía, descubriría que mi alabanza a ti tan solo corresponde a los que son semejantes a mí, quienes son ellos mismos tus criaturas, y han sido generados mediante el poder de tu decreto y creados mediante la potencia de tu voluntad. Y siempre que mi pluma atribuye gloria a alguno de tus nombres, pareciera que oigo la voz de su lamento por su lejanía de ti, y reconozco su llanto debido a su separación de tu ser. Atestiguo que todo lo que hay fuera de ti no es sino tu creación, y se encuentra en la palma de tu mano. La aceptación de cualquier acción o alabanza de tus criaturas no es sino una prueba de las maravillas de tu gracia y tus magníficos favores, y una manifestación de tu generosidad y providencia. Te suplico, mi Señor, por tu más grande nombre, mediante el cual separaste la luz del fuego y la verdad de la negación, que hagas descender sobre mí, sobre aquellos de mis amados que se encuentran en mi compañía, el bien de este mundo y del venidero. Provéenos, pues, con tus maravillosos dones que están ocultos a los ojos de todos. Tú eres en verdad el modelador de toda la creación. No hay Dios sino tú, el Todopoderoso, el Todoglorioso, el Altísimo.
Glory be to thee, O God, for thy manifestation of love to mankind. O thou who art our life and light, guide thy servants in thy way, and make us rich in thee and free from all save thee. O God, teach us thy oneness and give us a realization of thy unity, that we may see no one save thee. Thou art the merciful and the giver of bounty. O God, create in the hearts of thy beloved the fire of thy love, that it may consume the thought of everything save thee. Reveal to us, O God, in exalted eternity that thou hast ever been and will ever be, and that there is no God save thee. Verily, in thee will we find comfort and strength. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you so much, dear friends. Thank you very much. Tonight we have a very special evening uh, with Mr. Gordon Naylor. Mr. Naylor has been a friend of this fireside for from the beginning of this fireside. I would like to thank him very much for always accepting to be here. I'm sure you all know him. Uh, Mr. Naylor has been instrumental in creating, developing, and implementing programs of education and empowerment of youth and families. He has completed graduate studies in international education, clinical psychology, and educational administration. Mr. Naylor has lectured extensively throughout the world on education and moral leadership. His subject tonight, as you all know, is imitation or the truth of transcendence. Uh, Ward, thank you so much for being here. This was a very short bio, but probably for people like you, a short bio is enough. Go ahead, please.
I think we all really like short bios, and I'm happy that it was short, but it actually might have been a little long. But thank you, Cruz. And it is always a special occasion when you get to be present with Firuzeh and her event, because I think it always ends up leaving everyone feeling uplifted. And she goes to great lengths to be able to do that. And I myself appreciate it. I wish I could be there more. If you hear noise in the background or a little noise in the background, it's because we have many things going on Thursday night. And right now we're having a big Chinese eating party out in my dining room and in my kitchen, which I've benefited from this evening. But sometimes they might get a little loud and excited. And then just after that, there's going to be a large youth fireside. So I'm sequestered in a place that hopefully you don't get too much background noise, but I apologize if there is some. I'm really happy to get a chance to speak to this subject of imitation and transcendence through truth, because I think it's probably at the root of many of the problems that we're seeing all over the world. And at a time when we were all hoping that things would get better, it seems like many things are getting worse. But these are, as Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, says, all part of the birth pangs of a new world order and an evolution from a state of adolescence, and I might add, delinquent adolescence that humanity is in, into a state of maturity. And the reason I'd say delinquent adolescence is because, generally speaking, delinquents have a real hard problem trusting, and generally they don't have good relationships with other significant people that they should have relationships with, like maybe their parents, and sometimes for very good reasons. But the fact of the matter is, it causes them to stray from the guidance that would be necessary. And humanity has, unfortunately, for various reasons, one of them being imitation, has strayed from the ongoing guidance that God's created. And so imitation, regrettably, is probably one of the worst forces that has led humanity astray over time. We get very comfortable in what we're familiar with. And so it makes it, we would like very much to not have to change, especially the things that we might take some comfort from. And so it becomes a little bit difficult. I once heard of an experiment that I thought was quite interesting and kind of explained this very well. It's not that our world has been free of difficulties, or we haven't had tremendous difficulties in our lives or in our families, but it is that we get comfortable with those difficulties and fear changing them for something else. This experiment was, they took a group of dogs and they had them in a cage that had a wall between the two sides. and a light would come on, and they would administer a shock to the dogs, and the dogs really had no escape. So they soon learned that after 10 seconds of the light being on, the shock would be administered. So they would get down and they'd hunch in a certain way to be able to ride out the pain of the shock. And then when it was over, they would carry on like it hadn't happened. And that's what they would do. Another group of dogs they put in a cage, only this cage had only a half a barrier between the other side and theirs. So when the light came on, 10 seconds later, they had the chance to jump over the barrier. And once they learned to do that, they escaped the shock. So this was, they quickly learned to watch for the light and jump over the barrier, and then they were okay. But what do you think happened when they took the first group of dogs and put them in the cage where they could jump over the barrier? They didn't. They just got down and rode out the pain, not wanting to jump in case they would experience something worse, or just being used to what it is they have. And sometimes I feel like this is why we have so much imitation and such a fear of thinking for our own selves. In fact, sometimes I would watch what people would do and I would think, what are they thinking? And it was a great revelation when I finally realized that they weren't thinking at all. And that's why they would do what they did. I was putting way too much into it. And I think, in a way, the way we're raised, where we come from, our culture, etc., becomes familiar to us. And it may be even hard for us to imagine that could be different, or maybe that it could be better. And so sometimes we sort of want to imitate. This becomes a bigger problem when we get so attached to belief systems that had worked in the past that we don't want to acknowledge a new one in the future, and we prefer to imitate what we see around us. Even if when we're imitating, we don't actually believe in all the things that we're imitating, but it is what people do, so that's what people do. And of course, none of us would like to think that we do that, but it takes a lot of work for us to be able to examine our own misconceptions and understandings of things and be willing to recognize that there might be a better way. And of course, this positions us to really understand that the prophets and messengers of God are really not about repeating the past. They're really about changing the future and building a community that will embrace change so that it could become more of what it was created to become. And when you've been around for a long time and you see slow progress, you might even get cynical. You might even start to believe that things aren't going to change really very much. As one of my brother's professors told him, people only change enough to avoid future change. And I think that's an interesting statement. Why is it that we don't really want to seize the changes that are there or believe that they're going to happen? Usually because we're comparing it to our experience. And of course, our experience all over the world can vary a great deal. And so, we can understand why some people want to not change things, but imitation is, at the root of a lot of problems, and a lack of imagination or inappropriately applied imagination also becomes quite a problem. Baha'u'llah says religion must conform to science and reason. Otherwise, it is superstition. God has created man in order that he may perceive the verity of existence and endowed him with a mind or reason to discover truth. So all of us has this power of mind and reason to discover truth. Therefore, scientific knowledge and religious belief must be conformable to the analysis of this divine faculty in man. So with scientific reason and religion and true revelation from God, we're able to find truth in a much more wholesome and healthy way and confirm the things that are truth. Because if the truths we discover don't align with both things, then we're prone to error. We're prone to carry out action, in a kind of way that isn't balanced. There always has to be this academic excellence scientifically to strive for discovering truth, on the one hand, and this ethical and moral dimension and spiritual dimension on the other. And humanity has tried over and over in so many different ways to build a world without God, to build a world that doesn't rely on spiritual practices, to build a world sometimes that relies on superstitious spiritual practices that have nothing to do with true spirituality, and often to imitate each other doing that. So it takes a very kind of committed soul that is a lover of truth to be able to sift through all of the things in order to find the truth. Baha'u'llah goes on to say that, furthermore, know ye that God has created in man the power of reason, whereby man is enabled to investigate reality. God has not intended man to imitate blindly his fathers and ancestors. He has endowed him with mind, or the faculty of reasoning, by the exercise of which he is to investigate and discover the truth, and that which he finds real and true he must accept. This is another really interesting thing. Very often in universities, we go to learn and to discover truth without ever thinking that we actually have to apply these truths or these things that we learn. So it's one thing to understand something to be true. It's another thing to be able to apply it. And lots of times we go about talking truths to each other without necessarily being able to apply them in our lives. Well, this is the day of maturity, and Baha'u'llah has said he won't accept one without the other. He won't accept belief without the application of that belief, without deeds that testify to that. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And he says, don't advise others to do what you wouldn't do yourself. That's a kind of purifying thing. Sometimes what we would like to give advice to others comes quickly to our mind. But if we ask ourselves, are we following that? Are we doing that? We may not be able to say yes to that. So there's this challenge that humanity now faces about imitation and the discovery of truth, because he's saying here that whatever you find to be real and true, you must accept. He must not be an imitator or blind follower of any sort. He must not rely implicitly upon the opinion of any man without investigation. Nay, each soul must seek intelligently and independently, arriving at a real conclusion and bound only by that reality. The greatest cause of bereavement, he says, and disheartening in the world of humanity is ignorance based on blind imitation. So he's saying, you know, the greatest cause of bereavement, sadness, and disheartening in the world is ignorance based upon blind imitation. It is due to this that wars and battles prevail. From this cause, hatred and animosity arise continually among mankind. So when we think about this imitation, you know, that's why I really wanted to talk a little bit about it tonight, because I felt that, you know, religion even has spread with this idea that we want each other to imitate each other. And I don't think that's the faith that Baha'u'llah wants to see. He wants to see, you know, in some countries, 90% of the population has embraced a religion, but nothing has changed in terms of poverty or riches or extremes. So of what value is that? And he basically calls to account humanity to apply truths in such a way that it would make a difference to people. And so many of the social injustices that we see are because of us imitating prejudices and imitating other things that we don't even question. He says, and the breeding ground of all these tragedies is prejudice. Prejudice of race and nation, of religion, of political opinion, and the root cause of prejudice is blind imitation of the past. Imitation in religion, in racial attitudes, in national bias in politics. So long as this aping of the past persisted, I like that term he uses, so long as this aping, like following like apes, of the past persisted, just so long will the foundation of the social order be blown to the four winds. Just so long will humanity be continually exposed to direst peril. And we're watching in the world direst peril, being visited upon literally thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. So, you know, despite efforts for us to uplift humanity and work on this freeing of prejudice, it seems that it persisted, and it is the greatest cause of bereavement to people. And then we have the audacity to blame God for this, which is really something that's beyond the wildest of imaginations. And you know, when we do that, we fail to take accountability ourselves of the things that have to be changed. One of the interesting things that I've seen from the House of Justice, well, many things come from the House of Justice, which is the supreme governing body of the Baha'i world, is that they have their pulse on the illness that humanity is suffering from. They have their finger on that pulse, and they're prescribing a remedy. But even that remedy that's being prescribed, people are hesitant to apply in many cases. And, you know, I just came back from Grenada, as Firouz and they said. And maybe I'll just tell you briefly about that project. One of the things the House of Justice has asked the Baha'i world to do is to care about the children and to care about the junior youth and put that care into action, making sure that they are able to be understood and properly guided through discussion and developing of education. So we have children's classes and junior youth, and these are two of the core practices of what it is to be a Baha'i, along with the study of the sacred word and the application of it in our lives for service. But these two are kind of interesting because right now, as one comedian said, we've turned the children over to social media and we're hoping that they do a good job of raising them. And now we're going to have AI, so then hopefully that'll even be an improvement on the raising of our children, since it seems we find it difficult to want to raise them ourselves. That's very evident when we actually see how many people have had good conversations with children. And it's kind of interesting that the more humanity moves away from a sense of community building and the society building powers that the House of Justice refers to, the less we see of engagement with children and junior youth. But fortunately, the Baha'i community really all over the world is focusing on this and building really armies of people. And the House of Justice in this Rizwan message has said, it used to say that youth could move the world. And in this message, it says, all must surge, but the youth must soar. So what would it look like to have the youth soaring in the world? What would that be? I'm sure it doesn't mean that they would fly around. Their intentions have to be focused on being empowered to develop the children, the junior youth, and the youth of the world, as well as by their example, ennoble and encourage the adults, most of whom, or a lot of whom, have become quite cynical and maybe even apathetic. But I think, you know, I had the experience, every year we take the grade 11 students to another country and they do performances on social justice issues in high schools. And usually we perform to audiences of 500 or 1,000 people in all the high schools. If we go to an island, maybe 15 high schools in 2 weeks. And they get very excited about the opportunity that things might change. But then we come back here and we usually encourage the youth to join the junior youth processes. But unfortunately, in many of these places on the ground, there aren't many activities going on. So we try to go where there are some of those activities. But in collaboration with the counselors, we decided that it wasn't long enough to do this in 2 weeks. So we designed a program at Nancy Campbell that the grade 11s would go and do this 2 weeks of performance. And then they'd spend 3 months in a village or in a neighborhood where they'd start to build relationships with the youth that are there until the point where they themselves wanted to work together with our youth to start children's classes and junior youth in the neighborhood, to go and meet with the parents and talk about how the children and junior youth have to be properly guided. And so we actually had 6 youth that remained for 3 months. So I just came back from the end of that time. They're actually coming back on Saturday. But I was so impressed with how much work they had done, how many children had become so enamored and loving of them, how many parents had the utmost respect for them, and how many people in that community, they had raised up other youth who were now going to continue the children's classes after they leave. And to see this in action really meant that in a neighborhood that was probably fairly unfortunate, they now really see a course of how they could become better in helping each other and how they could make a difference in their community. So it was really very inspiring, and to see these youth who, like typical North American youth, you know, had all the issues that they might have, but through this very extensive period of doing some of their studies, but going into the neighborhoods every day, building these relationships, and that carrying on for a 3-month period. They got all excited and decided to decorate the whole Baha'i Center. They decided to paint it all to make it beautiful for the neighborhood. They were staying in it, so that became quite a focal point, to the point that all the neighbors are now wanting to find out about it. And they've become very enamored of the work that these youth have done. I'll just maybe take a moment to just show you a few pictures, if I can actually show you them. I'm not sure you're going to be able to see them, but maybe. So they painted these, oh, they come out backwards, which is unfortunate. You know, they've done these beautiful pictures all over the walls at the back of the center, you know, where they're showing the oneness of humanity. They're just beautifying things. And they've created a place for meeting there, and really have made it such an attractive place that everybody's stopping to see it, you know, with quotations that talk about service to humanity. And all the children and junior youth are getting very excited about it. Now, the remedy that God has prescribed at this point is that we have to really engage in more and more relationships with people, whatever level we can do. And we have to start trying to build these bridges and, in a sense, claim back a sense of valuing other people. And because we're working in these communities now, not with the idea that you have to become us, but work together to really make a difference in our community, we start to see hope coming back into a population that had felt quite hopeless, had felt neglected by the government, or felt neglected by people that they were hoping would help them. Our youth started helping the youth with their educational problems as well, and learning from them. And actually, when I looked at the youth that we brought there, you could quickly realize that they had really gained more than they had given. They had transformed themselves, and this service had inspired them to want to do more and more things. It was so exciting to see, and the counselors and the institutions involved were so pleased with the work that they did. So we need to see examples of when we stop imitating things. And you know, a lot of the youth and the adults that they were interacting with wanted their attention. It was kind of interesting. There was a sort of Caribbean bar on one of the corners, and they playing loud, you know, Caribbean music. And so our youth would wave to them and go by. And then just a couple days before I left, one of the fathers that was at the bar called the youth over and said, "Why have you come here? What did you come here for? Why don't you look after your own people back where you came from? Like, what are you doing here?" And they explained that, okay, well, really, we're world citizens, and we care about children and youth everywhere. And so we came to work with the children and youth here and the youth here to make a difference in this village. And we hope that some of them could come and help us where we are. So we weren't, you know, and as they talked, he said, "No, come up here and sit at the table." He wanted them to come and discuss, because his daughter had gone to the junior youth thing. And he said, "You know, I want to understand exactly why it is you're doing this and what's motivating you." And the music was blaring loud, and he made them sit down at the table with him. And then he made the barkeeper turn off the music. Well, I don't know if you know the Caribbean, but you don't turn off the music in the Caribbean. So it was something that was quite outstanding, that he wanted to make sure he could hear what was going on. And then he said to them, "I feel you passed me by 5 times and you didn't even say hello." You know, and I'm thinking, here's a full-grown adult wanting the attention of these youth because he sees them as somebody that it, you know, cares about his community and wants to be involved. And there were a lot of very touching stories of the other youth, new youth that just had started helping. And he said, you know, at first I saw that our youth weren't necessarily listening, but then they started talking about how important it was to straighten out their thoughts and help the community and so on. And I see the difference, and they're gradually starting to move. So he was quite convinced that this was a good thing. And he was talking about the work like he owned the work, that it was his work and that it was the work of the community. And it was so wonderful to see. He's one of the junior youth animators now that will be left there. And one of the 6 youth is going to stay for another couple months. We're going to send some more youth down for a month later. But we don't want to make it a dependent process. We want to make it an inspired process coming from the people there. And when I see this happening, I see that we're not imitating things. In the Baha'i faith, you know, we accept all religions as having come from God. We don't follow all the messengers, but we believe that they all came from God. And that makes us really wonderful community workers, because we have no prejudice against anyone, you know, whatever their background. And it doesn't matter what they say they believe in. We say, okay, well, come and help us build the community here together. We want to build a better neighborhood. We want to build a stronger community. We want to make the children understand what's really important and spiritual so they won't be guided incorrectly. And we'll all work together to do that. So we are prepared to work with everyone that wants to care about those things. And when you see our youth being activated to do this, they've transformed that whole community. And I'm sure it will go on and continue. So, you know, when youth are given an opportunity to soar, they do soar. And even they themselves almost can't recognize themselves as it goes along. But the other thing that I've learned as an educator is that when they do service, they start to feel empowered as individuals that can make a difference. And then their capacity to learn and to develop their talents becomes much, much greater. It has this benefit. Abdu'l-Baha said, let a Baha'i child learn in a month what others learn in a year. So as an educator, I started thinking, well, what does that mean? Does he expect that we're going to do 12 years in 1 year? Of course he doesn't. But what would they be doing with a lot of the other time? This to me was the formula that's saying when we inspire our youth and our children to do service in the community, their capacity to learn would be much better, much greater, much faster, because they're applying it all the time to be useful in the community, to see change happen, to believe change could happen. It's very important that we provide that example as adults to children and junior youth. I remember one of my friends, a psychiatrist, child psychiatrist, Dr. Santa Barbara. She was a Nobel Peace Prize winner for physicians for disarmament. And she told me one day that they had done research on children that were about the effect of war and whether it was causing depression in children in North America. And she said the interesting thing was the children who had parents that were working in some way for a peace process did not suffer the same sadness and depression about or fear about war and other things that were going on in the world. And when they asked the children, well, why are you feeling confident about things? They would always say, because my mother and father are working for it. They're doing things. So the example of each other to show our children, just like their example to do things for the world inspires us, it has an effect and it gives people hope. So in this time of darkness with war and all these things that are going on, I think it's really important that we need to center our thoughts. You know, there's a quotation that says, so long as the thoughts of an individual are scattered, he will achieve no results. But if his thinking be concentrated on a single point, wonderful will be the fruits thereof. One cannot obtain the full force of the sunlight when it is cast on a flat mirror. But once the sun shineth upon a concave mirror or on a lens that is convex, all its heat will be concentrated on a single point, and that one point will burn the hottest. Thus, it is necessary to focus one's thinking on a single point so that it will become an effective force. So if we were to think about this, there would be great danger to focus our thoughts on points that were not worthwhile or worthy of humanity. And the House of Justice, following the guidance of Baha'u'llah, has made very clear that the oneness of mankind is the point that we have to focus on. We have to make all of our efforts to bring about this oneness, to not allow any division between people to be acceptable in our own minds and hearts or in the minds and hearts of others. And we have to help our children and our junior youth to be properly guided by this. But why do we get confused about this? Why do we find it hard to focus on a purpose or a point? Baha'u'llah says this about that. We are led astray by imagination, even in violation of will and reason. We imagine something else to be more important. It is our test power, he says. We are tested by our ability to control and subdue it. A man imagines he is wealthy. Someday real wealth comes to him, but it is never what he imagined it would be. Imagination is our greatest misleader. We hold to it until it becomes fixed in memory. Then we hold to it, the stronger believing it to be the fact. It is a great power of the soul, but without value unless rightly controlled and guided. So we have to start using our imagination to realize God's purpose, not necessarily what we come up with in our imaginations. It's possible that we could have a different imagination with every person on earth, but of what value would that be to the prosperity and well-being of humankind? This is why we need to really listen to what it is the House of Justice is telling us to do. And even if it doesn't make sense to us, make an effort to do it. Because as we do it, we'll start to see the confirmations about why it's important to do. And it starts very small, like all of us can build community. And as we start to do that, the House of Justice says, we will have revealed to us the society building powers of the faith of Baha'u'llah. He didn't come to replicate the past. He is not interested in perpetuating what we've already done. He is interested in transforming civilization. And to that end, to lift humanity out of poverty, to ensure that souls are reaching their potential of the gifts that they have to make a difference in the world, and to inspire the hearts and uplift the souls. That's his intention. It's not his intention to confirm any of the madness that we've created so far. And anything about that will be swept away because we're leaving our state of adolescence and we're moving to the state of maturation. And that is a painful transition that's going to take some time, but it is his intention that we will make it. He says, the winds of despair, writes Baha'u'llah, as he surveys the immediate destinies of mankind, are at last blowing from every direction, and the strife that divides and afflicts the human race is daily increasing. The signs of impending convulsions and chaos can now be discerned, inasmuch as the prevailing order appears to be lamentably defective. Such shall be its plight, he in another connection has declared, that to disclose it now would not be meet and seemly. These fruitless strifes, he on the other hand, contemplating the future of mankind, has emphatically prophesied in the course of his memorable interview with Edward Granville Brown. These ruinous wars shall pass away, and the most great peace shall come. He talks about the present day order being rolled up and humanity moving into its maturity. And at the same time as this is happening, what is being rolled out is a new world order that continually calls upon the Creator to be inspired through devotional meetings, that studies the sacred word of God and tries to make changes take place. So I think that we can have the confidence that we're going to see a lot of changes. Most of them will have a lot to do with tragedy. But we're not to pay attention to those. We're to pay attention to the building ones, the ones that are building community. Because if we don't do that, then we're not going to be able to see the changes until we do it. And in actual fact, Baha'u'llah makes very clear that as individuals, we can make choices. But as a collective, we don't get to make a choice. The world is going to move in the direction the Creator intended, whatever the consequences. What we can do if we move in that direction and help others see that direction is alleviate suffering and speed the opportunity for us to realize the world that God intends for us to create. He could do it with the snap of his fingers, even though he doesn't really need fingers. But he actually wants us to build it, because in order for us to be worthy to live in it, we're going to have to build it. So it won't be done without the power. And we'd be very wise to do everything in our community to empower youth, because they will soar and they'll take us there much faster. They'll be like the arrowhead in the arrow that leads the way if we empower them and make a difference. I think I probably talked too long, and you might have been overwhelmed with that discussion. But if you see, when you see youth doing this, and you see how vibrant they become and how knowledgeable they become and how humble they become in relation to the rest of humanity, you have great hope. And because they constantly, would say prayers and call upon God and study the series of courses in the Rui Institute that helps them acquire skills and apply those skills, they become so inspired and so empowered that they look forward to their future. And while you watch them, you look forward to your future. And it is just a wonderful thing to see. So those powers are being released, even while these other ones are taking their course. And the birth will take place as Baha'u'llah has promised.
Thank you so much, Gord. Thank you for inviting us to such a positive and hopeful future. There might be some glitches on our way to get there.
Some big ones.
Some big ones.
But we can handle that.
Thank you. I always enjoy your talks, and I have seen the pictures of the youth painting the Baha'i Center in Granada and all these exciting things that are happening. Thank you for sharing some of it with us. Now, if the friends have any questions, please go ahead. Otherwise, I have a question, but please go ahead. Feel free to ask questions. So we'll give people.
John, I don't have question, but I want to tell something. Thank you so much, Mr. Gordon. Really. But when Mr. Gordon talked about this activity, society building, I was shared with him because I am busy and I am working with this program. If I wanted to talk, I couldn't talk, not less or more word. He explained everything. It was the same, and I am very happy we are busy for this program.
Wonderful.
Society building. We are working with Nepalese. I am living in Washington, Virginia, close to Washington, D.C. We are working in the area with many population of Nepalese, Indian, Spanish, and Afghan, and sometimes from Africa.
Wonderful.
And now they are at the one family, really.
Wonderful. Wonderful. The Baha'is and their friends are amazing people. They're working everywhere in the world to do this, and it's very, very exciting. Thank you for all those services.
Thank you, Padishah Jun. I appreciate it. Gord, I have a question for you, and that is, when you go to these different islands or different countries and you take the youth with you, do you have a plan, or do you come up with a plan in consultation with people who are there? How these plans would evolve?
Well, you know, when we come up with this idea to keep them, to take them there for 3 months, and you know, we really didn't know if it would work. And one of the youth that I just that's there now, she said, you know, when you told us to come here, you didn't give us, we wanted more detail. And I said, well, we didn't have detail. What detail would I give you? We get on the plane, we go there, we know the methods of the plan are, you know, talk with conversations with people, start having the conversations until they start to get moved to want to make a difference in their community. So, you know, the youth started having these conversations and just telling them, we don't want to go and do something to a neighborhood. We want to have youth understand the things. And once they understand what's possible, or there is possibilities, then the plan starts to evolve, right? And of course, we guide them to the methods of the plan, because we know children need to have attention paid to them. And their minds are all over the map, having been, you know, turned over to whatever, social media, whatever the things are. And the second one is, you know, the junior youth are the most confused because they see adults doing all kinds of crazy things. Then they're children, but they're not adults enough, and they don't know if they can trust the adults in their life, to be quite frank. So they're really trying to figure out direction and purpose and intention. And of course, those come from the guidance and the junior youth materials. And then they have great discussions. So that all starts them to be developing. And then the youth, of course, become involved, and they start to realize what's going on is not the best. But also involving the parents. We found it like, you know, we made our youth go to the parents 2 at a time. You know, every week they were going to talk to the parents. Like, how is it going? How is this child? Well, I'm having a problem with my child doing that. Okay, we're going to cover that in the class. We're going to help them develop. So then you start giving this idea that you're working together as a team with the parents to help inspire them. And of course, junior youth love to look up to youth, and they'll listen to youth more than they'd listen to other adults, to be honest. And they start to realize, well, my goodness, he thinks this. So it starts to unfold, and it just gets actually richer and richer. And then we're always looking to how to extend these methods, right? As I said, nobody really wants to spend time with children and junior youth, to be honest. And so when you go into a community and you start caring about them, and it's not easy to do. The youth had to learn a lot about how to keep discipline without crushing spirits, you know, and that's always a challenge that every parent has to learn. But once they start to learn that, they realize how to inspire them. And so the plan starts to unfold more and more. And I think to plan, you know, the bishops in the Catholic faith, I remember hearing this, that they said to make too many plans is an act of presumption before God, which I think, you know, because we don't know what God is going to show us. And so after they've worked in the community for a while, things start to emerge as important. But we don't depart from the methods of the plan, because the House of Justice has said these are the portals that are going to build a new civilization. And the reason they're the portals is because they don't allow us to depart from the mix, the creative interplay between the spiritual powers that God has sent us and the human powers that we can provide. So, you know, if you go to a devotional meeting, you're saying prayers, and then you're talking about what you're going to do in the community. If you're thinking about service, you're talking about what you're doing in the community, and that brings the power of the Holy Spirit. If you're studying the writings, you're getting inspired with lofty thoughts of things that would help you. So this mix of, these are the society building methods that the House of Justice has given us. And if we trust them, and we make them real and relevant to people, like you let them talk about whatever their sorrows and problems are, and then you try to figure out through consultation how you can help. We can't solve all the problems. I went to a Catholic priests conference And at that conference, they asked me to speak about the Baha'i faith. So I spoke about the faith, and they had different religions speaking about religions. And they said, if you'd like to stay for the next workshop, you could stay. Well, I decided to stay because I was kind of interested to know what the priests were going through. All of it was like, you know, we can't look after our congregation. It's falling apart. We need more money to hire people to look after these people. And what I was listening to was very sincere people who were trying to help, but it was impossible. And through this plan that the House of Justice has given, you realize that that model of clergy is an unsustainable model. They can't possibly look after the masses of humanity. So what is it that these society building powers are? These youth, a 15-year-old can take you, a 50-year-old or a 60-year-old or a 30-year-old, through a sequence of study to profoundly understand many things about the revelation of Baha'u'llah. And they can do that at 15 years old. You know, that is not a clergy. That is a facilitator that allows really rich discussions between people, so that instead of preaching at each other, we learn as people how to apply the words of God in our lives. And we need to do that at every age. And that's what happens here. And to build the skills we need to care about each other, which is really what the Institute courses are. So I think when you think about it, I know Tare, my daughter, was just a delegate at the National Convention. And, you know, the counselors were emphasizing over and over that we have to keep with the methods of the faith. You know, like we have to have the confidence. Baha'u'llah is not giving the answer to every problem. He's giving us methods that when we start to use them, they create environments that empower more and more souls to be able to help more and more souls. So it's not a system that builds someone into a rich, brilliant individual, but it builds everybody into being richer and more prosperous in their life and more capable of handling human problems that really are afflicting us at every level and preventing and blighting potential. So I see in the neighborhoods when this starts to happen, you know, the children become so amazing and the youth become so amazing that they can help the parents. And the parents, and instead of making divisions, even if the parents are doing something wrong, to help teach them how they're going to have to find a way to unify, to bring them together, to help build that stronger unity. So you can tell I get a little bit too excited about it, but as you see it work, it's because you realize that the House of Justice didn't take away our clergy, which we had developed. I think I was one of them, you know, and it wasn't that I wanted to be one, but it wasn't very nice when I knew if I said no to a talk, that the world was not going to happen in that neck of the woods. Now you don't have to worry about that because Baha'is can study together. They can do a book together. They can say a devotional together. And it's wonderful to have talks, but it's just a part of our rich community. It's not the basis of our rich community. We're not dependent on individuals anymore. And so many thousands and hundreds of thousands of people can be empowered and rebuild. Many of these Caribbean islands get hit by hurricanes, and now this process, the House of Justice sends one soul in there to start this process, and they all start rebuilding and feeling hope and getting excited because they see that they are channeling this divine power and that they are capable of transcending great difficulties. So to me, what is the truth we're going to use to transcend? We're going to use the truth of the oneness of mankind. We're all in this together, and it doesn't matter what calamity hits us. We know the methods to transcend that calamity. And we can rebuild a new society no matter what the crazy people of the world are doing to us beyond our powers, which is how many people feel when they're subject to the kind of horrific atrocities that are going on. But in the end, what happens? In the end, we have to rebuild, and we have to have methods to rebuild, and we have to have hope to rebuild. And that can only come from one place. But we're all becoming, I decided to use the words, I'm calling these SOAR projects now, because the House of Justice uses this SOAR word. And then I thought, okay, what could SOAR stand for? And I decided, okay, it's service opportunities activating resources. That's what it is. Because that's what the House of Justice is really doing. Through this service to the community and the building of community, we're activating more and more resources, ones that we never expected we had people that we never thought would really be able to do much can do a huge amount. And those that can't do anything can pray for the others. And you start to see that it's limitless. It's infinite in its capacity to heal the world.
Thanks so much, Gord. Appreciate it. Dr. Moshrif Zadeh, please go ahead.
Robert, thank you very much. So, you know, I have fundamentally an issue with the investigation of truth to be as important as perhaps you advocated for. First of all, truth, if we really want truth, is very complex. Reasonable people can disagree. Second, knowledge without more is not enough. Otherwise, scientists would all be good people. They're not. And inventors would be using their inventions for the betterment of the world. They're not. Politicians, those who are educated, they're still bad people for the most part. And furthermore, if investigation of truth by itself were sufficient, there would not be any need for religion. It's just advocate people, investigate the truth for yourself, follow scientists. I think this education that Baha'u'llah, the Baha'i faith refers to, and knowledge, is for the most part spiritual knowledge. Spiritual education, because knowledge does not change someone's heart. Institutional racism in the United States is not based on ignorance, not at all. It's based on power. Whites maintaining power over Blacks, indigenous people, and Latinos. They know. And if my boss takes advantage of me, he doesn't, but if he were, he could, even though he acknowledges that we are both human, but it doesn't get into his way. It's not about it just having the facts. It's about internalizing them. Mm-hmm. And that comes, as Baha'u'llah says, and Abdul Baha'i promulgation of universal peace, that it's just the love of God. You know, how that happens, who knows? You know, with regards to social issues, just to demonstrate how difficult things are, or this investigation of truth. There are many social issues. The Baha'i faith is not consistent with the current science. This is not those are not the issue, the topic tonight, but they're obvious, and Baha'is avoid them because they don't know how to reconcile those with science. So investigate the truth, but there are, even in the Baha'i faith, there are apparent dichotomies and inconsistencies. I think it's about spiritual knowledge. It's about spiritual education and love of God, not this ordinary investigation of truth.
So maybe I can just say, sorry, I just have to move because my battery is saying it's getting low, so I've got to plug myself in here. I don't think that there's any real disagreement about things. I think Baha'u'llah says truth is one and the ignorant have multiplied it. So something that is religiously true or spiritually true is also materially true, because he says that the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. And so the structures that we've created and the power dynamics that you're talking about definitely have been created by all kinds of self-centered individuals, habits, and practices that have been around for longer than we have been. And the world, I did say this in the talk, has continually tried, humanity has continually tried, and is still trying more than ever to do this, to look after humanity. When I say look after, I'm not saying look after humanity for the well-being of humanity, but to manage humanity to its own end and for its own purposes, and without God, and without spirituality. Baha'u'llah says that we are both, in this world, we have a material and a spiritual reality. And in fact, he likens them to two wings. So he does tell us that there has to be a balance between these two things. But what I think is an error that the world's making a lot of is to believe that truth is, there's different types of truth. There aren't different types of truth. There's truth is one, as we said, and the ignorant have multiplied it. So when we say that prejudice is ignorance, that doesn't, when Abdul Baha says that, it doesn't diminish the power of that ignorance. And I remember Nat Rutstein used to say a phrase that I liked, which was, prejudice is an emotional commitment to ignorance. Not only are they ignorant, they're emotionally committed to it, and they'll do anything to demonstrate that they're superior over somebody else. And they'll do it in more and more subtle forms that get what they want out of it in the end. So that intrigue and all of that's going on all the time at a very, very high level. And I don't think the Baha'i faith is underestimated in any way the force of that. And in fact says that it's practically leading to the entire ruin of humanity. And more is to come. Because why? Because we're stubbornly, as the House of Justice said in Century of Light, we're stubbornly resisting the spiritual nature of the problem. So for that, I completely agree with you about that it is spiritual knowledge that we have to really start to be able to grapple with and to wield. We can't continue to be trapped in a paradigm of material, self-centered ignorance that results in the horrific things that we see every day on our news screen. Because if we just accept that as the paradigm that is going to repeat itself over and over again, so what should we do? We might as well just imitate what happened in the past, or not care, or lock ourselves away, or give up. But the fact is, Baha'u'llah has no intention of turning over the world to such forces. And he makes very clear that individually we can do a lot of damage. We can commit to really working that system and destroying lives if we choose to do that. But in the end, we are not going to win that battle in the war, because the collective, he promises, will not be submerged in that ocean of self-centered greed and materialism, which is at the root of all of this prejudice and hatred, because it empowers certain individuals to become wealthier and wealthier. But the real problem is humanity is not going to change this by focusing on the problem. And that's a very unusual thing to say, because if we focus on that problem, we, as you're mentioning, we can see how vast it is, how big it is, how complex it is, how systemic it is. But just because we identify something exists and we know about it, does not do anything really to change it. And if the world is committed to that, we have a problem. Science right now is predicting great catastrophes like hurricanes and earthquakes and all these things. And somehow humanity has come to believe that because science is now predicting that's significant. But science hasn't done anything to prevent them. Now, one thing it can do by predicting is be able to move people out of the way. But prophecies predicted those things before. And so when you look at it, it's just two ways of knowing. One was a religious prophecy that said the same things. Now science is able to identify how it's happening and why it's going to keep happening. But to apply science at the level where it's going to free humanity from the pain and difficulties of those things is going to take a much different kind of will than the present is. I remember Peter Kahn saying, when it comes to the right of God and the resources of the world, going that, what is the House of Justice going to do with all of this? And he said he thinks that one of the things that could happen is it's going to take on some of these world problems. Like he said, no way could they fix the Sahara Desert from becoming bigger and bigger. But the House of Justice could do that because it surmounts many countries. It could develop a program and have resources to be able to do that. So he says there's going to be great things done in the future with the wealth of the world when that wealth is being used for the benefit of mankind. But when we're in an ignorant state where we can't even decide how to look after our own people, and in fact will pervert and destroy our own people and allow others to do that, then of course we're not anywhere near the kind of maturity that's going to have to happen. Add to that the fact that there's a lot of things in the writings that talk about in the future, we're going to be getting, visits from other planets and so on. We're going to be in a bad shape. God's not asking us to be a unified planet because we're going to be happy together. We have to be unified because that's where our true prosperity and strength comes from. So to me, it's a matter of focus. And I think that quote about imagination kind of talks about it. We can spend our time describing the problem and getting very good at it, and even getting theories about it and understanding how it comes about. But it's a bit like, I remember Hussein Dinesh said this thing once, which made a lot of sense to me in terms of this. He said, imagine that you're in a room and all the windows have been blocked up, all the lights been taken out, and all the people have to live in there. He said, now you have to develop things because you start banging into each other. So you develop little instruments to put on your head. So when you're coming close, it starts to beep. You have to develop all kinds of things to move around in that very dark space. And these things you become better and better at developing all these dark and magical things that help you live better in a condition of blackness. But then he says, someone opens the window and lets light in. And then what benefit is all those instruments? They become instantly worthless because everything has changed. And we've seen this happen in the world when a new way of looking at something changes the paradigm. And I think as Baha'is, we have to realize that God is guiding the House of Justice to find that window all the time. And before the world has a clue about whether or not that's going to work, we're already advanced in advancing it, even though we ourselves are used to the darkness and don't even know what the House of Justice is saying and aren't even sure if we follow them, it's going to work, except we're doing it as a matter of faith in the covenant and the principle that they wouldn't guide us inappropriately. But as we exercise our will to do that, we start to see unfolding before us some of the potentialities that start to happen. And I guess I would rather focus my attention on how to do that than to figure out how to live in this darkness. Because as we build those opportunities, then the ways open to empower the oppressed and free them from these individuals that are hell-bent on oppressing. And now we have multinational corporations doing this. We have so many people trying to do the wrong thing. But at the same time, even within these great institutions that are not so great, there's a lot of change happening. There's a lot of things starting to percolate. I wouldn't count on it as the means to really change. A lot of catastrophes will have to happen because we are stubbornly resisting the spiritual nature of the problem. We are so stubborn about it, we want to spend all of our time talking about the problem and making it bigger. And the people that are benefiting from it are happy that we're doing that because they're going to make it bigger and they're going to make more money with us doing it. And that's why I don't think that's the best investment of our time. It's not like sticking your head in the sand because you know what they're doing, but you choose not to see it. As Abdul Baha said, it's not that I don't see your faults. I choose not to look at them. I choose to look at your capacity for the future. So to me, we have to help our youth and our children to be future focused. If we have future focused discipline and we discipline ourselves to unfold a different future, I've seen the worst of communities that are the most hopeless, that nobody wants to go to, that nobody thinks will ever be anything. I've gone into those communities and applying these methods that the House of Justice has given us, you realize that the world has them all wrong. and that they can profoundly change. And that's not even with the power of God. That's just doing decent things with people that are being accused of being nothing. But when you add the power of God to that, and you empower them to use and wield the powers of spirituality, then we start to see a different civilization. We start to see a different level of capacity being developed. And that's what the new race of men is going to look like. It's not going to be from us, you know, children of the half-light. It's got to be developing from something much greater. And we don't know where it's taking us. You know, we can't regret it. You know, in that same writing, which I didn't read on, Baha'u'llah says we can't even envision what it is that he has in mind. You know, like it's beyond our dreams, really. And I think if we trust the process, you know, either Baha'u'llah is, and Nancy Campbell used to say this all the time, either he's the greatest lie or the greatest truth. And you have to decide which one. And if he is the greatest truth, then you follow his guidance through now the House of Justice, and be sure, because of faith, not always because we can see it. Because I'd have to say, if I was being honest, when I heard about these 4 methods, I can't say I was sold immediately. I was trying to figure out, how the heck is this going to solve the problems? But as you start to work with the process and you start to see it unfolding, I've been at the International Convention where I sit with the people from the Congo, and I see how excited and happy they are and how they have tears in their eyes from the changes they've seen in their villages since they instituted these methods, the empowerment that they have. The Western world is left behind now. At the International Convention, the poorer countries like Africa and India, these are the ones that are advancing at such a rate, empowering many, many, many more of their people, because they don't have arrogance. They don't have anything else. So they embrace the ways of God much faster, because they say, you know, like, it's kind of like what my sister said when I became a Baha'i, and my dad was worried that I was going to all these Baha'i meetings and everything. And so she said to me, well, what? We're strong Catholics. My mother had thrown my brother out of the house. And she said, well, Gord, well, what happens if you find out in the end that what you're doing, the Baha'i faith isn't correct, and it's the Catholic religion? And I said, well, let us think about that for a minute. What would I be doing? I'm helping people. I'm trying to empower people. I'm trying to help their children. I'm trying to help adults. What could I possibly be blamed for in this effort of serving humanity that would be something that the Catholics wouldn't like? How could God judge me, you know, any way than what is happening? What has Baha'u'llah asked me to do? And by the way, I'm having fun at all these meetings, and I'm really enjoying myself. So it's not like, you know, some crucifixion that I'm having happen to me. It's a joyful enterprise of getting very excited about the future. You know, it's kind of like what atheists are offering me. What are they offering me? I asked them for their deal, and it's just nothing. They have nothing to offer. Well, I'd rather believe in God, and even if he doesn't exist, than what it is you're offering me. So when we look at the practicality of it, whether we look at it from a practical or a spiritual point of view, truth is one. These things are going to change the world, and they are changing the world all over the planet, all over the planet. But don't spend our energies with the people that are drowning, who insist on drowning, because they're going to unfortunately drown. But anyone that wants a helping hand to change the way it is the dream that Mae Maxwell had, where everybody's drowning in the river, being pulled by the current of the water. And she's pulling them out, and Abdul Baha's teaching people there. And she tries to get him to come, and he won't come. And he tells her, because he knows she's upset that he's not coming. And he said, I'm building a dam to prevent this from happening. I'm building a way out of that so people don't have to lose their lives. And that is what we're doing. For each effort they make to destroy things, we make a stronger effort to build something in a community with a soul who cares about their life and wants to try and make a difference. And in the end, it doesn't matter what hell you've been through. That's what it comes down to, a very human thing. of me helping you and you helping me whenever we can. Because when we do that in our communities, everything will improve. And if I concentrate on every tragedy, every injustice that happens, then what do I get? Even Baha'u'llah said, consultation is how we come to what is just. Why? Because we can't remedy all these ills and horrible things that have happened to people. We have to move forward with the strengths we have, no matter what has happened. And it just depends on what you want to build. If you want to spend a lot of time describing that problem and going on in detail about it, then I'm not saying there's no worth to it, but at a certain point, you just decide, okay, I think I know enough about that problem. I remember listening to Rahil Hanum in Montreal. Somebody asked her about prophecies in the Bible. And could she please explain some prophecies for Baha'u'llah? And her answer quite shocked me. She said, well, actually, I don't have time to do that. There's many books written about prophecy. You go and read them if that's what you're interested in. I have 100 books of Baha'u'llah that I'm trying to figure out how to apply to build a new world. That's where my concentration is. In the essence, that's what she said. If you want to go and study those things, go ahead. If you need to do that, go ahead. But I don't need to do that. I have things that I have to get onto that Baha'u'llah's asking us to do. And he's got a lot of guidance for those things to happen and unfold a brighter future. So what would you like to stay with? And to me, that is the crisis of investigation of truth. Investigate the truth to the point that you're motivated to make a real change. Because to hang on to some truths that only make us feel worse, confirm that yes, the world is a disaster, and not follow the guidance of the way out of the disaster, to me is not going to be helpful. And youth, believe me, are not interested in that. They're not interested in it. They know the world's made a mess of things. They know that we haven't exactly put them in the best area. They know that social media isn't the best for them. But compared to what else we're offering them, they're not too interested in that either. So, people are escaping into a little box that the rich are making better and better so we can consume all of your hours in that little box. Because that's where, and we turn the cities over to people that really don't care about them, but it doesn't matter because we're all living in those little boxes. We buy our avatars, we make ourselves more wonderful. It's not real, none of it's real, but we're ready to spend our real money on it and not build the real world that we need to build. So that's the challenge, to move out of the little boxes, move out of the false realities that the rich and the famous and the greedy are building for us, and just refuse them. And then we see a difference. I don't know if that classifies as a bit of a rant, but I didn't mean it to be a rant. I just think for me, if anything, I'm saying it louder for myself so I don't get confused and I don't lose my concentration on what is important. Because I myself, at a certain point in universities, I was studying in university. I was convinced that I was going to change the world at university, and then I got the writings of the Bab. After reading 80 pages, it took that much for me to get through my dense head of materialism that the universities were creating. And I thought, of what difference would it make for me to have a whole bunch more of these things when the world needs other help right away? So, there's a point where we decide to do the helping and the building, and not because we want to save ourselves, but to save people from sadness and a lack of hope when people are such amazing beings. The gem is of inestimable value, is our soul, so we don't want the souls being unhappy. Mrs. Fadi Azam said, if it's spiritual, it's light. Feel what light feels like. And when some people want to talk you into everything being really heavy, get out of there, because that's not light. Turn to the light that makes us feel uplifted. And I'm not saying this in a superficial way, but getting really heavy is not the condition that Baha'u'llah has asked us to be. He's asked us, happiness is our birthright. I don't get happy looking at the horrible problems of the world. I do want to know about them, but only enough to know that I want to build more of those good things that truly make us happy. And the real riches are in our relationships, not in anything else. That's true prosperity. And the only way we can do that is by treating people with justice and helping them to realize that there are some people in the world that don't think they're less than or more than somebody else. And we have to root that out of our personality whenever we see its ugly head. As Rahia Hanum said, our ego is like a snake that curls up around us. We got to keep our foot on its head so it doesn't get to curl up around us. Whenever we think we're too smart, or we're smarter than God wants us to be, or we're busier than God wants us to be, then we really have to get busy with the right things.
Thanks, Gord. Appreciate it. There are a few people who have questions. I would like to invite Mr. Behnam, who is very active in the chat, and he's making a few comments and questions and all of that. Please show your face and you're welcome. This is a family gathering, and you can actually address your questions and comments to Gord, no problem. Mr. Behnam, Mahvashun, go ahead, please.
Merci, Firouzja. Gordon, hi, nice to see you. Thanks for wonderful and informing, interesting talk, as always. I just have a few questions about your trip to Granada, and very fast and small or short question and short answer. So I'm not going to take too long. Is that okay with you?
Wonderful.
Okay. When we went, how many youth did you take with you?
I went with about 15 youth altogether to do the performances, and we left, after 2 weeks, we left 6.
Okay. And were they all from your area that you live, like Toronto area, or from different parts?
They're all students of Nancy Campbell Academy.
Oh, that's okay. Okay.
1 or 2 of them were not from there. 1 or 2 of them were
Okay.
joined and came.
So their ages is all what, 15 and up? Between 15 and 18, you say
Well,
youth?
Yeah, the intention was to take grade 11 students, but we ended up
just grade 11, right? That's where
But
my
yeah,
grandchildren.
grade 12, and we actually ended up with 1 grade 9 student who was 15, who was absolutely amazing.
Oh, that's interesting. And how is the accommodation there? Where do they stay? And even, their finances, everybody's responsible for themselves, like to...
Well, each student paid $3,000 for their ticket and towards something, but in addition to that, we needed to have $27,000 more. All of the expenses and cars and whatever else we had to do. And so we asked people to donate, and people did donate for those things. So that was kind of expenses were handled. And the students that could come but couldn't afford it, then they of course would pay for it.
Sure. So did they stay in these villages in different people's houses or in one spot?
Well,
or?
actually there was a believer there that had a house, and she had a 2-bedroom apartment downstairs, so we all just crowded in there on air mattresses because they're in the army. The army of life. They will make do with what they have to do because that's all part of the trade.
Wow. It's just for you that you're like a youth. You just go with them, do everything with them. Isn't that amazing? That's good for you, girl. Wonderful. Anyhow, thank you so much. That's great. I hope this happens a lot. My grandson, Abbas's son, is now 16.
Oh, wonderful.
So,
well, maybe he'll come sometime.
Yeah, that would be great. Right. Thanks again. Thanks, Firouzja.
Thank you, Mahvashun. Pina, good evening or good morning, Pina. Pina is joining us from Malaysia.
Oh, wonderful. Malaysia is a beautiful country.
It is. Unmute yourself, Pina, please.
And you have very good food there, Pina.
Yes, welcome. Amadi Kashumadi. Well, actually, I believe all the answers have been answered. All the questions have been answered by what you have said, I believe.
Thank
And
you.
even whatever I can say is just a repetition.
Wonderful. I like repetition.
So, as I am reminded of what the writing says, that nothing saved that shall benefit my nothing save that which profiteth them shall befall my loved ones.
Yeah.
So whatever we face in this world, in trying to soar, as the message from the House of Justice said, that the youth should soar, and we behind these wings, we hope to be the wings.
Mhm.
And whatever the challenges may come, let us remember what Baha'u'llah said, nothing say that which profited them shall befall my loved ones, because we have the remedy, as he said. Nothing else is working in this world, whatever that is.
Yeah.
But Baha'u'llah has given, the divine physician has given us the divine remedy. We have it.
We do.
And this yoke that you have talked about is the example of this soaring youth, and we hope that at least we could take our part to be behind these wings of this youth, to soar in everywhere, in every part of the world. As the Christian prayer, the kingdom of God shall be on earth as it is in heaven.
Absolutely.
Let us work for that. The vision is so beautiful. The paradise. If we become, as one mentioned, it is very easy to go against, to go with the flow rather than against the current.
Uh-huh.
But if our mind is focused on the vision, it's just so beautiful. It's so beautiful that you don't mind all these challenges. That Abdul Baha said, rely upon God, trust in Him, praise Him and call Him continually to mind. He verily turneth trouble into ease, sorrow into solace, and toil into utter peace. We have everything that we need to see the beautiful vision, to go onward, to press onward. Thank you so much. It's so inspiring. You know what, when you are talking, I feel like, I hope this is a radio that the whole world is listening to. To know that
I feel that way when you're talking.
that we have, this is the right solution. The consultation, even though we know, okay, we have the medicine, we have the right decision. How do we do it? And you said, of course, the right Baha'u'llah said, consultation. You see? And there is still a process of introducing this medicine with wisdom, with love, with humility, and all that is needed. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Board Pina speaks Farsi fluently. She sings prayers and things in Farsi and Arabic after the session is finished for our devotions. I always ask her to say a prayer, and she always sings in Farsi. Pina, Mr. Behnam, who has not shown his face to us because he says he's at work, said, and Malaysia is always ahead in accomplishing the plans of the Universal House of Justice. So this is another accolade for our Malaysian friends tonight.
Yeah. And I was thinking as she was talking that Malaysia has always done an outstanding job of being the wind under the wings of the youth and having them do the most advanced things in their community. So I'm sure that we're going to hear more of the great things that the youth will do there. So it's very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you. Shola June, welcome. Thanks for coming tonight. Please go ahead.
My pleasure, Furusjan. And thank you, Gordon, for the most enlightening presentation. Love the word SOAR and the acronym, the way you've worked it out with service opportunity, activities, and resources. It just says it all. I just have an interest, if I may just ask a question, which is sort of looking at a different perspective of what you have covered tonight, quite ably, I might add. As we trust the process of God, following the wisdom, guidance of the universal of justice through our faith unquestioningly, we see with our own eyes what the spiritual empowerment program Junior Youth has done. I just came back recently from Belize for a month of being and serving there in community building activities, and seeing the junior youth. I must tell you, I mean, besides renovating Baha'is centers and doing all the community building activities, seeing the junior youth come alive in their JY was just so heartening. That was my reward. I'm an educator. I teach at university. I see the age group. I could see a couple of these were not the younger ones, they were the older ones who were leading. And the question came to my mind, and this is, perhaps you could enlighten me, is that our junior youth 13 to 15 go through this amazingly transformative process. What are some of the, should I call it strategic directions or projects or programs that we have available or being pointed to 15 to 18-year-olds as they sort of age out of JY? Where do we take our youth so they don't lose that enthusiasm? Yes, we can get them to teach children's classes, become animators, clearly, we can do that. But if you'd clarify if there are any more specific directions, guidance, or projects to really to harness that incredibly dynamic resources that have been created through the JY Spiritual Empowerment Program, so we can keep that momentum going. I wish to incorporate that into future the JY groups that I'm involved with, whether here or in Belize or in other goal countries that I've got plans for. So I hope I'm clear in my question. How do we address 15, 18-year-olds and their incredible pool of resources so they can soar, continue to soar? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that that's a very good question, and I think it's been a little bit more complicated for our communities, I think, to properly empower them. You know, if the SOAR thing is, you know, service opportunities activating resources, then I feel like with the youth, we have to, just like we should be inspiring junior youth to want to become future animators. They get excited about the idea that they could become animators for junior youth programs once they're older, and that they have to go through, when they're 15, they have to go through the sequences of courses. We have to help them see that by going through those sequences, it's preparing them for a greater field of service. So I think that the discussion has to be that, okay, when you finish the junior youth program, you've now developed a pattern of studying, you know, things and putting them into practice. So what's the next level? The next level is when you're 15 to 18, you need to be completing all of the sequence of courses. And you need to be some of you might love to be a junior youth animator. Some of you might like to work in children's classes, but others of you might like to take other youth in discussions through the sequence of courses to become an animator. Or you might be interested in becoming an animator with adult groups, and you might want to choose what books might be attractive to your generation, like right now, I have a couple of youth that were thinking about getting married that were, one was 18 and one's 20. Then they said, you know, will you do a book 12 for us? So that's, you know, so we started a book 12. Well, I thought it was going to be, I said, okay, well, if the two of you are doing it and maybe one or two others, that'd be great. Well, now it just seemed like everybody wanted to get into that. And now we have like, you know, I don't know, 16 people, and we are having the most animated discussions about marriages and relationships I've had. And because I've really tried to make sure that they don't see me in some kind of authority role, but really to really, the questions are beautiful. That book is wonderful. And I think for that age group, it's a hot topic, right? About relationships. And actually, I look forward to it every week, honestly, because it's so exciting. You never know what you're going to be discussing next, and everything. We made a comfortable environment for them to be able to discuss everything, which includes their fears and their thoughts. You know, I told them, I recently, my daughter Bronwyn, who was a board member, sent me this study that said, you know, more than 50% of marriages are failing in North America. But there was a study out of Texas that showed if a couple prays together and hold hands, that it goes down to 2%.
Yes.
So she said, I told my husband, we are praying. I don't care what you think about it. You're going to be starting to pray no matter what, because that's what the research shows. Whether you feel comfortable or not, we're going to do this. So, you know, I said, if that is a practice that has already proven scientifically to be successful, well, of course, they had a lot of things to say about that, like what should the prayers look like? And, you know, would that really be the case? So I'm saying that to get into the books and to make sure they should do book 8, like these are the books that really lay a solid foundation. So they feel very comfortable being teachers. And I would encourage them to also go to other neighborhoods to see what they're doing, to learn from other neighborhoods. Like, what are the youth doing in this neighborhood? And there's some focus neighborhoods, right? Like maybe you can't go for a month, but you could go for a few days and just go around and learn from what they're doing, so that they can go back to their community and start to get a bit of a different vision of what could happen. Or maybe they get a chance to go on this kind of project where they start to see how capable they are. What I saw with these youth, the 6 that are right now in Grenada, honestly, I could not believe how they become such intense teachers, so interested in knowing answers to how am I going to answer that question? This person I bumped into the neighborhood, this is what he wants to know. I need to figure out the answer to that. So it was very interesting for me to see. And I told them, Abdu'l-Baha says, do you know how to create a thirst for spirituality? And they said, no, they didn't know. I said, Abdu'l-Baha says, study the writings. So I said, it's kind of funny, because if you don't have a thirst, you're not going to study the writings. But if you do study the writings, you are going to get a thirst. So I said, even if you don't know why you should be studying them, you should know that that's how you're going to become thirsty spiritual, and your soul's going to be looking for paths of service. It's going to be the other concept that I started discussing with them what is the spiritual destiny of their soul. Like, we have to connect ourselves to our spiritual destiny. And what do we think it is that God has in mind for us? Each one of us isn't here by accident. We each have specific things. And then I told them, when Rahil Hanum would travel with Mrs. Nachavani, after she gave a talk, she would ask Mrs. Nachavani to give a talk. And Mrs. Nachavani said, this was ridiculous. She said, what are you going to say after Rahil Hanum says her talk? Like, she felt so embarrassed that she would be asked to say something. And Rahil Hanum insisted that she talked and said to her that I will open certain hearts because I'm a key to those hearts. And you are a key to some other hearts. Maybe I didn't open somebody's heart. And if we both say something, then that would give that. So I use that story to kind of say, it doesn't matter how good or how wonderful you think somebody else is. Each of us is designed to open hearts. And we have to think of how to do that. We have to be. So then I think we try to build 15 to 18-year-olds as the one that are going to make our community soar. The House of Justice said before, youth can move the world. Well, the world has moved now, and now it has to soar. And that means our youth are going to have very strong capacity, you know, and we need to stop having conventional discussions with youth, and we need to have profoundly spiritual discussions about why were they created, what is their spiritual destiny to be, not that I know it, but that we have to figure it out. And we should share our thoughts, you know, like I started saying to some youth, like what that 15-year-old youth, before I left Grenada, I took her aside and I said, you have a very unique destiny. You have exceptional abilities in many areas. And I'm not saying this to make your head big. I'm saying this because that you have to figure out what that is. But I want you to know that I notice. And she was very moved by that, you know. And I know that she's going to take it seriously, like she's now even trying to see, okay, so to me, it has to be, we have to inspire them to say, yes, we're doing wonderful, only because God has touched us and we're channeling his power. Don't ever think it comes from you. But when you are properly channeling it, you can go to a higher level. You can go to a higher level of unity with others. You can go to a higher level of inspiring others. And all of that, we each have to work on how to do that. So once we accomplish something, you can pat yourself on the back for a minute, but then get on with the task, you know? So I think that these kinds of things where we tell them, okay, now it's time for you to become a tutor. You're 15. You should be able to tutor all the books. If you do up to book 7, then you can tutor others. Make sure you take them so you can tutor them. You'll be doing them many times. It doesn't matter if you're tutoring one person or 2 persons. When they started in that neighborhood, some of the youth could only come at this time or that time. So Sila would say, okay, come now. You go with that one. You do book 1. You take them through book 1. You do this lesson and that lesson. Okay, come back again. You do it. She didn't care if it was one-to-one tutoring or a group tutoring. Mm-hmm. So like if we empower our youth to do that, you don't have to make a group. Get 1, 2. Like I thought I was doing 2 for book 12. Now I have 10 in there. And the book is very exciting. So they all want to be there. You know, and I don't let them say that, you know, you're doing it special. We're all doing it. It's exciting. I'm very excited that you're being authentic in here and we're talking straight stuff and you're really asking good questions. So I hope this is a reasonable answer, but to try to look at spiritual destiny, making sure they get the skills through the sequence of courses, make sure they see their role now as moving the whole adult population and the youth population, and children and junior youth if they want to do that, but not to do so many different things. Like I'm also telling people, you should do one core activity really well, and then you should accompany somebody else to do it really well, so that they can do another one. So that you don't overwhelm yourself with 15 activities, but you are helping others to do more. Because if we can get 100 people doing one core activity really well, that's going to be better than if we have 10 people doing 10, because they're going to burn out. Or they're going to get tired and not do as much, although I don't believe in burnout.
Thank you. Yeah, excellent.
The spiritual destiny one is really important. And that goes with you recognizing their qualities. I see that you're this. You're an intelligent, spiritual person that thinks deeply, cares deeply. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that already. So now how are we going to, how does that connect to your spiritual destiny? What is your heart being moved to do? What is your path of service?
Mm-hmm. However, in that area, precisely in that pivotal area, is the career ahead of them, because they're also grappling with that. I find myself constantly as a career guidance counselor, almost in a spiritual sense, because we're seeing the virtues, we're working with them closely, and have the privilege of actually observing those and articulating those qualities. And that's a blessing. It's a blessing to be able to be in that position.
And that's what they should be doing. And Baha'u'llah says the highest form of detachment is to have a job and earn a living. So I tell them this is not an inconvenience that you're feeling the need to focus on this. This is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, all of us would just like to teach all the time, but we have to earn a living too. And we have to spend on the ones that we love. And so I think we integrate that very much as a part of the coherent whole. So yeah, part of your spiritual destiny is deciding what your life's work going to be. What inspires you to want to do work? I should be retiring, but I said I retired a long time ago because I only do things that I love. And I've, thanks to Baha'u'llah, he's let me do a whole bunch of things that I love. So what is retirement? I'm going to sit on a beach with a cocktail in my hand and wonder what the heck I'm doing there? That's not my idea of any fun. I might do that, well, not with the cocktail, but I might be on the beach for a couple of days, you know. But the fact is we get inspired by doing other things. And we should do the things we love. So I think we have to connect their hearts to the things they love. And maybe that's their calling because they're being called to do that. So don't look at other people. Think of what your heart's being moved. Your path of service is not just your core activities. It's also your work, your family. That's all part of your path of service.
Thank you so much. Appreciated. Before we get the last question, may I ask Tara, John, as well as Julie? Hi, Julie. Prayer, prayer, prayer. Mr. Perimal and Sanaita, as well as Mr. Khan Larry, Human Khan, would you like to say a prayer? We usually would start our devotions at a bit earlier than this, but tonight we had a very rich session. So I'm very grateful for that. Pina, stay please. And Faride June, please go for it. Do you have a question, Faride June?
Yes, Allah Akbar. I don't want to take your time. It was wonderful subject. It was wonderful. I'm so sorry my camera is off. I am not so beautiful like Firuze June. She's so beautiful. Mr. Gordon, you know me, Faride from, you came to our home with George. You see my husband George in Florida. I am in Chicago. And I asked a quick question. I wanted to know how many Baha'i youth you have in Canada, how you attracting them, and then how they attending to the 19th feast or not. Because here in the United States, I talk to so many community and many places, we don't have youth. How you attracting? And also our age, the youth not coming to us. I don't know, you're so handsome. I think the youth like you, the junior youth like you. What is the attraction? Love all of you. Thank you.
Well, I'm cheating. I'm actually a cheater. I have a school and that attracts a lot of youth. And then I have, like tonight, I'm having a fireside out there with 30 youth. So I have an embarrassment of riches, all these tremendous resources. But yeah, so, but I do think that in the communities, I think when youth attract youth, so I think sometimes we need to utilize some other youth to come and perhaps try to make connections, make friendships. So I do, like I'm going to Wildfire this weekend where there's a bunch of youth from all over the province coming, and that's one of the things we'll be talking about is how, you know, how do we, we're talking about the same subject of imitation. I think talking to youth about subjects they're interested in is very important. I honestly think that doing book 12 is a wonderful thing. Youth love to talk about relationships. So I think we have to talk about the things people are interested in, and we have to try to, you know, connect with them. Once they start to get some assistance and guidance from the faith about things they're interested in, then they start to broaden their interests and then want to know more, and, you know, they get this thirst to know more. So I would suggest to try to find youth that might have an interest or express an issue, and see maybe if they have one or two others, and start small, start with one or two. Start, you know, like, and then those two could find others. So I think we would build it from small to bigger. That's what I'd say.
Thank you so much. Friends, it's 10 to 9. Are you, Human Khan, Mr. Ishraqi, are you asking questions or are you raising your hands for saying prayers? I'm a little confused. Yeah.
We pray.
Pray. Oh, perfect. Okay, Gord, thank you so very much for being
Okay,
here.
I have a very fast suggestion for Farida John, and also I'm going to say prayer after that.
Okay, well, why don't we say the prayers first, and after that, by all means, Mr. Shravi, that would be great. Faridajan will stay till the end of the session.
Maybe she stay here. She's my cousin. Before she leaves, I have to talk to her.
No, don't worry. I don't leave. I love it, Firuze Jun, so much. You're a long-time friend. I don't leave. Only my camera is off. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tarajan. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Allah Hapa. Sorry that my camera is off today. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm going to chant hidden word number 4.
Thank you.
به نام گوینده توانا ای پسر انصاف کدام عاشق جز در وطن معشوق محل گیرد و کدام طالب که بی مطلوب راحت جوید عاشق صادق را حیا در وصال است و موت در فراق عاشق صادق را حیا در وصال است و موت در فراق صدرشان از صبر خالی و قلوبشان از الصبا مقدس صدرشان از صبر خالی و قلوبشان از استبا مقدس از 100,000 جان درگذرم و به کوی جانان شتابم
Julie?
Unis les cœurs de tes serviteurs, révèle-leur ton grand dessein. Puisses-tu suivre tes commandements et observer tes préceptes et ta loi. Aide-les, mon Dieu, dans leurs efforts. Donne-leur la force de te servir. Guide leurs pas dans ton sentier. Par ton amour, réjouis leur cœur. Ô mon Seigneur, il n'y a pas d'autre Dieu que toi, le Tout-Puissant, dispensateur de tous les dons, Baha'u'llah.
Tina?
به الطاف حضرت پروردگار امیدوار باش و از مصائبی شدید این جهان نومید مگار. الحمدلله خدای مهربان داره کتابی بیار بیمار است و کمکاری هر مبتلا پناهیت من است و محربی کسان و به نهایت مهربان. اگر بدانی که قلب عبدالبها چقدر مهربان است، البته عزیزات فرح و سرود پرواش نمایه و فریاده و تو با بیوجی اسمان رسانی والبهاءالله. Amen. In English, He is God. O thou seeker of the kingdom, be trustful of God's grace and despair not of this world's bitter vicissitudes. Praise be God that thou hast a kind and loving Lord, who is the healer of every ailing one and caring of every afflicted one. He is the refuge to every orphan and the helper of every helpless one, and exceedingly loving. If thou knew how tender Abdul-Baha's heart is, thou wouldest from pure joy soar in the atmosphere of heavenly delight and shout to heaven in pure exaltation. Upon thee be the glory of the glorious. Abdul-Baha.
O thou kind Lord, graciously bestow a pair of heavenly wings onto each of these weaklings and give them spiritual power that they may wing their flight through this limitless space and may soar to the heights of the above kingdom. O Lord, strengthen these fragile seedlings that each one may become a fruitful tree, verdant and flourishing. Render these souls victorious through the potency of thy celestial hosts, that they may be able to crush the forces of error and ignorance, and unfurl the standard of fellowship and guidance amidst the people, that they may, even as the reviving breeze of the spring, refresh and quicken the trees of human souls, and like unto vernal showers, make the meadows of that region green and fertile. Thou art the mighty and the powerful. Thou art the bestower and the all-loving. Abdul Baham.
Thanks be unto thee, O thou the desire of the world. And praise be unto thee, O thou the beloved of the people of understanding. May all existence be a sacrifice for thy favor, and all that hath been and will ever be a ransom for thy word. O thou the wronged amongst the people of enmity, O thou in whose grasp are the reins of all who are in heaven and on earth. Baha'u'llah.
والا ای پروردگار، این تشنه سلسبیل حیات را از چشمه حیوان بنوشان و این علیل را از درمان ملکوتی معالجه فرما. این مریض را شفای حقیقی بخش و این تریفراش را از دریاق عظم قوه و توانایی عطا فرما. توی شافی، توی کافی و توی وافی. این